Hello and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History and our second live stream where we're looking at the first news broadcast that told the story that Elvis was gone. Just to review what happened in our last episode, we met Joyce, who is our avatar, our 1977 Elvis fan who is fictional, but who keeps a notebook of everything that happened surrounding August 16th, 1977, because she's determined to solve this mystery of what actually happened to Elvis. And so in the last episode, she began taking some notes, and we can take a look at her notebook now. Let me just pull it up. Joyce listened to some radio broadcasts, and from those radio broadcasts, she learned a few things. And the first radio broadcast she listened to was WEPG, and there she learned from the Memphis police had said that Elvis Presley, in respiratory distress, was taken to the emergency room at Baptist Hospital, where he passed away. So that's all she really got out of that first news broadcast. And that's pretty typical of what most people would have heard on that day as these events unfolded. And then from CBS WREC radio news, she heard a report from Stephanie Shelton and Dan Osborne, who said that Elvis Presley died this afternoon. He apparently collapsed at his home in South Memphis, was transported to Baptist Hospital by fire department ambulance. A hospital spokesman earlier said Elvis suffered from respiratory distress. So that kind of matches up with what had happened before, but gives her a little more detail, that the fire department had taken him there in an ambulance, and it had been during the afternoon. And then from CBS, the same broadcast actually said that Memphis Civil Defense Office, which this is kind of strange, that the Memphis Civil Defense Office is handing out statements about the passing of Elvis Presley. But they said a later report confirmed through the local Memphis Civil Defense Office that revealed Elvis was dead on arrival. So we'd heard he was in respiratory distress, but now we're hearing from the Memphis Civil Defense Office that he was DOA. So that's a little bit different. And then she hears another CBS radio broadcast, and this is also Dan Osborne reporting. And he's confirming that the Civil Defense Office had said that Elvis was DOA, and that the hospital vice president said, that would be the Baptist Hospital vice president, said Elvis was suffering from respiratory distress. So that's where that report came from. That's the hospital official that was talked about in the first radio broadcast. Let me just check something over here. Okay. Okay, and then she heard another CBS News radio broadcast, and this one, well, it was the same one actually, but it had some more interesting information in it, and it was directly from the Memphis Police Director, Winslow Chapman. And it was Doug Pauling reporting, and it said that the Memphis Police Director, Winslow Chapman, said Mr. Presley's personal physician, Dr. Nicopolis, was the one that called for the ambulance. He was the one that was with him when the ambulance arrived, and he's the doctor that pronounced him dead at the Baptist Hospital. So normally, as we go along during this investigation, I won't be revealing what information is correct and which information is incorrect. But in this case, I'm going to make an exception so that we all understand that Dr. Nicopolis was not the person that called for the ambulance. It was actually Joe Esposito or somebody else at Graceland. We'll find out for sure later. But Dr. Nicopolis was actually not at Graceland at that moment. And He was with him when the ambulance arrived, and he is the one that pronounced him dead. But there's one piece of information out of 3 that isn't correct, and that just kind of shows how this information gets out there, and then how some of it could be wrong. And even though it's coming from a very trusted source, and this is coming directly from the top cop in Memphis, the police director, Winslow Chapman. So I just find that incredibly interesting that we're going to be able to track all of that as we continue through and we keep looking at Joyce's notes. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first television broadcast for today. And that's going to be this one with from NBC News, and it has let me pull up my notes here, make sure I get this right. It's David Brinkley, who was a famous reporter at the time, or anchor at the time. So let's take a look and see what David Brinkley has to say.
Warning, I upload this video only for historic reasons. The views, thoughts...
Rock and roll, as he was called, died quickly and quietly in the bedroom of his mansion here this afternoon. He was found unconscious on the floor of his bedroom by his road manager, Joe Esposito. After Esposito's attempts to revive Presley failed, he called the Memphis Fire Department ambulance service. The ambulance rushed the 42-year-old singer here to Baptist Hospital, a 10-minute trip from the mansion, and Presley was pronounced dead on arrival. An autopsy was held tonight, and late this evening, Shelby County Medical Examiner Dr. Jerry Francisco announced that Elvis Presley had died of a severe, irregular heartbeat.
The autopsy had been completed, and the cause of death is cardiac arrhythmia due to undetermined causes. Now, what this means is that there are several cardiovascular diseases present, which include a history of mild hypertension, which was under pretty good control, and some coronary artery disease. Now, these 2 diseases may have been responsible for this cardiac arrhythmia. The precise cause has not yet been determined for the cardiac arrhythmia. It may take several days to several weeks to determine that specific cause, and in some cases it never is discovered.
The physicians also said there was no evidence of excessive drug use, which discounts earlier rumors of a possible drug overdose. Outside the heavy gates of the mansion Presley built for his late mother, crowds began to gather this afternoon. Many were ardent fans. Many were simply curious. Some were crying. Presley.
Hi, Elvis History. Hi, Carolyn. Thanks for joining me during our second broadcast here and bearing with me as I learn how to operate all of the software to give us this, what I hope is a glimpse of a 1977 experience. Well, I'm glad you could jump over here. I was, during that hour, I was trying to just dial things in here, but I think they're working now. So I think that was a pretty interesting broadcast that we just saw. This was NBC. So like, this is how most of the nation would have seen this news. And how they would have gathered it. And this would have been probably one of the most trusted sources that anyone could watch. Let's go ahead and watch a little bit more. Basically, Brinkley's gonna put us into like a life history, and we don't really want to watch the life history. Let's move along here. Okay, we do want to see this.
who knew a lot about music and a lot about Elvis are here tonight to talk about him and his music, including Murray McKay, a disc jockey who was playing Elvis Presley records back in 1954. Steve Dunleavy, who is a writer for the New York Post and has written a very revealing book about Elvis Presley. And Dave Marsh, a music writer for the Rolling Stone magazine. Dave, is it an over-exaggeration to say that Elvis was the king of rock and roll?
Not at all. You could call him the emperor of rock and roll, and you wouldn't at all be underestimating the facts.
Why is that?
Well, he blazed the path that everyone else followed. He really did. He was the first white kid, at least, to take not only to take to take a kind of black music and popularize it with white kids, and it was very successful with black people also to integrate it into that country music and certain kinds of popular, straight popular music, and make a new kind of music out of it. And that's what we call rock and roll. And that's where it all comes from.
Murray, when you first played a Presley record in New York City, what was the reaction? Why did you play it?
I had heard a rumor to the fact that this small record label called Sun was being purchased. The masters of an artist by the name of Elvis Presley was going to be purchased by RCA Victor, and that he was a big sensation, especially down in the South. And one record that I remember having the original copy on the old Sun label was a record called Mystery Train. And during those days, I always had a thing on my show called the Record Review Board Contest, where I'd play the new records of the day and let our listeners listen to it and vote on it. And we played it that night, and it won, like going away. And from that day on, I guess we were playing Presley almost every day.
Was that, in your mind, the beginning of rock and roll?
Well, I think that, I think that there were three things that you have to say was responsible for rock and roll. One was Elvis Presley. The second was Bill Haley. And the third was the original communicator of rock and roll, and that was Alan Freed.
But Presley, to your mind, was a king?
He was the king. I mean, there are superstars and there are superstars. Elton John is a superstar. But when you talk about people who start eras, Benny Goodman was the king of swing. Frank Sinatra was the king of vocalists. Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll.
Place to stop that one. So this is just a lot of people remembering Elvis Presley, but this guy right here that's about to come up, this is the one I really want you to see. This guy, a lot of you may never have seen him before.
Well, last year, unfortunately,
Let's see if I can get his name up here.
His body wasn't working.
So this is Steve Dunleavy, and he is the author of the book, Elvis, What Happened? And so here he is on the night that Elvis passed away, and because of his connection to that book, he has been brought on to this television program on NBC to talk about Elvis, which is, well, let's just listen to him for a minute.
He was totally a product of the drugstore. He took pills to go to sleep. He took pills to get up. He took pills to eat. He took pills not to eat. He took pills to go on stage. He took pills to come off stage. And it was a classic case of the cliche of too much too soon. He had nothing more. He had no more mountains to climb. He had no more.
So Steve has a very specific view of Elvis, and he's not shy to let us all know what it is right here during his live broadcast. And there's going to be other connections to that book that come up that are on this specific day. And because of this day, his book gets printed. It had a print run. And that run was already done, and it wasn't really like a huge run. I don't remember the actual numbers. But because of this event, there's an immediate need to print more of these books because they're buying up everything that's Elvis, including records or any book they can get their hands on, including this one. So there's a demand to print these books, which puts a lot of money into Steve's pocket, plus allows him to get onto these very public broadcasts. So this is just a little interesting piece of history here. Let's listen to a little bit more of Steve.
Nothing more to attain. He was this very, very tragic, lonely millionaire, multi-millionaire, with this tiny circle of friends we all called the Memphis Mafia.
And three of them told you about their experiences with him.
Three of them, Red West, who had been with Elvis since Hume's High School in 1953. Sonny West, his cousin, had been with him for 16 years. Dave Hebler, relatively recent member of the Memphis Mafia since 1972. They were fired by Presley in July of last year.
But what was his life like this last year, for instance?
This last year? Well, I can only speak for the year previous to when the boys were fired.
Now that is a really important point, and Steve's very truthful about that. He can only speak to the time before the boys were fired. So he has no idea what's happened in the last year. And yet, right before this, and a lot of people may not listen to this whole interview. They may have stopped after what he initially said, which was that Elvis did a whole lot of pills, and these pills surely led to his death. That's basically what he was trying to get across. Now, maybe I misheard that, or you disagree with how I'm hearing that. Feel free to get that into the comments, or the comments if you watch this after the video. Let me know what you guys think about Steve Dunleavy and his good fortune to show up on television this night, to be available to do that. And let's hear what else he's got to say.
He would stay up in his room for 1 week, 2 weeks at a time, popping pills, getting out of it, just trying to get away from the world. He had no rudder. There was only two people that Presley ever really could rely on, who he really loved. That was his mother and his wife. Of course, Colonel Tom Parker, his guru, Svengali, whatever you wish to call him, was a very, very dramatic and strong influence. I mean, after all, this was a man that started him off, or who indeed not started him off, but at least saw the massive...
I think it's also kind of weird that he says Elvis could depend on his wife, and yet he hadn't had a wife for several years by this point, and hadn't had a wife at the time that the boys had left and started talking to Steve. So that's just an odd comment.
His potential and his sensational, charismatic talent. But his mother and Priscilla Presley were the two real things he loved in his life. And when they went, it appeared that he had no real rudder.
After his mother died and he was divorced.
After his mother died, he went into a depression and some kind of decline. Soon after his mother died, he married Priscilla, who I would say to the day he died and to the day she...
So soon after his mother died, he married Priscilla. Now, his mother died in 1958, and I believe he got married to Priscilla in 1967, I want to say. So like 9 years later. I don't know if that's soon. I don't know. What do you guys think?
She dies. I'll say they always loved each other very, very much. It's a classic love story.
Dave, aside from the personal tragedy that he may have suffered and the tough times he had, he left his mark on American music?
He left his mark not only on American music, but in my mind, he also left on our American culture. My hair wouldn't be as long. Everything sounds different because of him. Lots of things look different because of him. He really, one of the things I always think is, in the 60s, it took 10 people, 4 Beatles, 5 Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, to represent to youth what that one individual represented in the 50s, and really throughout. He was the model. He was a model for Bob Dylan. He was a big part of the model for the Beatles, and I'm sure he had his influence on the Rolling Stones. We simply wouldn't hear what we heard. We simply wouldn't look like what we look like. And maybe what I wonder most of all tonight is what kind of pressures that kind of public adulation and impact must have on him.
What did that do to him, being a king?
Well, let's say look at any one of us here right now. If we were 20, 21, and suddenly we had millions thrust upon us, adulation thrust upon us, a dirt poor kid from the South, a bad word, a nasty word, but one that's often used, white trash. What would we do if we had had all that thrust upon us? I don't think anyone is that strong. No one has the sight to withstand it, unless they have a center line. And at first, there was undoubtedly his mother was his center line. And then it was Priscilla was his center line. And after that went, there really wasn't much to hold Presley on an even course.
Murray, Presley told you he wouldn't live to see 40?
And there were two, that came about in the conversation we had. He had mentioned something to me about Splish Splash and Bobby Darin and my relationship to Bobby. And I don't know how it came about, but I had mentioned the fact that Bobby had said that he wouldn't live to be 40 years old. And he said, well, I know how he feels because I feel the same way. I don't think I'll live to be any older than my mother was. I think that Elvis was a victim of his environment that he chose to keep. Elvis wasn't really concerned too much with the outside world. He was more concerned with performers like what Roy Orbison was doing. Elvis really didn't really have dark hair. He really was a dirty blonde. And because Orbison started to become very popular, he dyed his hair. Orbison bought a house on the top of a small mountain, and Presley went out and bought a mountain.
What would you say now?
So I agree with you, Carolyn, that he was the blueprint for every artist that came after, and that the guy who said that said it very well on here. And it was interesting to hear that he had confided in somebody that he didn't think he would live past what his mom did. And he does have a very nice head of hair, which I'm not positive. Well, I'm sure it's his hair, but I'm not positive it's his natural hair. Let's move on to let me just fast forward through here and see what else is here. Oh, I think we got some news coming up.
Behind a horseshoe drive lined with glittering cars. Because he actually was a little shy, he didn't go out much, but everyone in Memphis knew he was there. He was a part of their lives. And so there was a special reaction there today when the news came out. Jackson Bain in Memphis.
David, there is something in the rock and roll dictionary called the Memphis sound. It's a solid rhythm and blues kind of music with roots heavy into Southern gospel. Memphis was the town Elvis Presley adopted as he rose from truck driver to established star, and the town adopted him as well. Memphis is the kind of town which is populated by just the kind of people who were the most ardent Elvis Presley fans, the middle and lower middle class ticket buyers and record buyers who made Presley the star he became. Well, those people were in shock this afternoon, incredulous. They kept asking the reporters here if it was really true, if there couldn't have been some mistake. The answer was confirmed. They walked away in stunned silence. Many turned back to the only Elvis Presley they ever really knew, not the quiet, reclusive millionaire.
Well, we don't want to get a copyright strike with any music that comes out. Let's see if we can jump over that.
At beginnings, they may have
Records.
What did I think? Oh, he was good. Like I used to like to look at him because he used to shake. I like to shake my. Well, he did. He felt all right. But he was all right. He did a great show. He was
This is the last album you put out before he died. What name of the last record?
Way Down.
Way down.
Way Down is his last record. That's his last album. Pressed on Blue Vinyl.
Yeah.
Presley came along in the 50s when the pop music world was ready, impatient in fact, for something to come along. The famous swing era of the big bands was dead or dying. Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Tommy Dorsey had about had their day. Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and a few others carried on, but it was uphill. And there was something called bop, hard, 1958. Here he's arriving for a tour of duty in Germany.
That's all the news that they've actually got in that little segment. So we'll go ahead and skip on past that. Let's let us see what is on this one. So this is WMC, which is a local station in Memphis. So we can hope for a little, more local newsy on this. Hopefully they've done a little more reporting than what the national guys know.
TV5, WMC TV, Memphis.
Oh, this is a very low volume broadcast. So somebody let me know if you can. Well, we don't want to have that. Let's jump ahead here.
Dick, Elvis Presley died here about 3:30 this afternoon.
Hopefully you can hear
He was
this.
found in his bathroom, unconscious, not breathing. Was brought to the hospital by ambulance. Efforts to revive him in the ambulance and efforts to revive him here at the hospital were unsuccessful, and Elvis was declared dead at 3:30. He had probably died earlier in the day, sometime between 9 and 2:30, doctors say. The last time he was found alive was at 9 o'clock. An autopsy was performed here this evening on Elvis's body, and according to doctors, the cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia. In other words, an unnatural heartbeat.
Thank you.
Elvis
Thank you, Terry.
evidently collapsed when his heart started beating out of tempo and then died. Doctors say they are not sure what caused the cardiac arrhythmia, although Elvis did have a history of hypertension, and he did have a cardiac disease which had not been detected before the autopsy was done.
So hypertension and had a cardiac disease that had never been detected before the autopsy, which means it's something that they saw, when they were actually inside him, not something that you would be able to detect when outside of the body in a normal circumstance. And of course, we've got to remember that back then, they did not have any imaging systems. So there was no MRI, there was no CAT scans. It was very dangerous to have a surgery, especially one that opened you up. There was a massive risk of infection. They had to cut all the way into you. Nowadays, they can do you laparoscopically, which means they just put a couple of holes in you and they stick their equipment in through there and they see it all through like cameras and mirrors and stuff. And it's really amazing. And you're able to have things done on an outpatient basis that back in 1977 would have put you in the hospital for weeks, like weeks and weeks. Well, let me say hi to Carolyn's mom. Thank you for listening to me too. I hope that you enjoy this broadcast and that we all learn a little something about Elvis from it. I know I've learned a little bit just from doing some of this research. So thank you for joining. So we learned a little bit about that, and now we're going to see something which I think you guys, if you've never seen this before, it's really going to be interesting to you.
There has been a great deal of speculation here at Baptist Hospital all day long that what caused the death of Elvis Presley was drug abuse. And in fact, Elvis was taking drugs for hypertension, for a colon disease that he had, and he was taking appetite depressants. But according to his personal doctor, Dr. George Nikopoulos, none of those drugs is an amphetamine. And when I asked both the doctor who performed the autopsy and Dr. Nikopoulos if drugs were related to his death in any way, they both said no. But they did find traces of drugs in Elvis's body during the autopsy, and it won't be known what those drugs are for a number of days until further tests have been done. As a matter of fact, Elvis, his personal...
So for some reason, this drug thing, which might be due to Steve Dunleavy and the book Elvis, What's Happened, it's being pushed heavily. And here, this reporter saying, I asked Dr. Nikopoulos directly, did these drugs kill him? And Dr. Nick said he wasn't taking any amphetamines, which is what everyone was basically saying that he was on. There were some rumors he was on some harder drugs, but most people discounted that. And the real belief was uppers and downers, right? But mostly the uppers would have been the issue. And he's saying he asked Dr. Nick, and Dr. Nick says none of that's true. And now they're going to do testing for it, and then we're going to know in the days to come what those tests say. So this is what we would have known, the night that Elvis passed away. This is what you would have seen on the news. This is what our friend Joyce, our 1977 fictional Elvis fan in Memphis following the story, this is what she would have seen.
The doctor said was in generally good health. He had performed a checkup on Elvis just 4 or 5 days ago and said he was fit for a concert tour, which was scheduled to start tonight nationally, with 2 performances scheduled in Memphis later this month. Elvis's body has now been moved from here at Baptist Hospital to the Memphis Funeral Home, which is taking care of all funeral arrangements. Dr. Nikopoulos says he expects the funeral probably will be held on Thursday. Live at Baptist Hospital, this is Mason Granger, Action News 5. An ambulance brought the king of rock and roll to Baptist Hospital at 3 o'clock.
So this is Baptist Hospital in 1977 on August 16th that you're seeing in these pictures. Baptist Hospital is gone. It has been demolished. There is a Baptist Hospital in Memphis now, but it's in a different place. It's not this Baptist Hospital. This is the same place that Elvis was spent a couple of weeks in at different points in time, in the earlier 1970s. And that is going to be referenced as we go through this investigation, but this is the place.
O'clock this afternoon. His road manager had found Elvis in his bedroom at his Graceland mansion.
Now, this is Joe Esposito. Joe Esposito, they're saying, is Elvis's road manager. Elvis met Joe when he was in the army in Germany, and he really liked Joe, and Joe was very detail-oriented. And they went on a vacation. I think this one was to Paris. I don't remember exactly, but they went somewhere, and Joe was thoughtful enough to pick up all of the receipts, and none of the other guys had ever picked up any of the receipts or anything. And he brought them back and gave them to Vernon. And Vernon, I believe, there's not a lot of evidence, but I believe Vernon found that very helpful. And Elvis decided to make a lot of the guys employees, or at least to offer them jobs as he left the army. And Joe was one of them. And Joe always kind of believed it was because Vernon really appreciated the fact that Joe was willing to take care of the books and report back what was happening in the checkbook with Elvis, and therefore Vernon could track that money and make sure the right things happened. Vernon was responsible for making sure there was always $1 million in the checking account. And with the way that Elvis spent, that could be very, very difficult. And I don't think a regular accountant could do it. But Vernon always did it. And some of that was with the help of Joe. But Joe was going to be traveling with him on this last tour. Joyce doesn't really know that, but that's just kind of the mechanics of how the tours worked. And so he was there that day to make sure everything was going fine and make sure, and they were all going to fly together on the Lisa Marie and get to they were going to Maine on this particular day.
Unconscious. He wasn't breathing. By the time the ambulance reached the hospital...
Now, that is the ambulance, and that is the ambulance that's at the dojo. If any of you are aware of Billy the Spa Guy, he's reopened his Memphis Museum, which is just down the street from Graceland, and he does have the ambulance in it. A lot of people have a lot of different feelings about the ambulance, but this is the ambulance.
Efforts to revive Elvis had failed.
Our Harvey team, our emergency resuscitation team, began working with him and continued this effort until approximately 3:30, when his personal physician, Dr. Nikopoulos, discontinued this effort.
Elvis was dead. The preliminary phases of the autopsy.
All right, this guy is Dr. Francisco. He's going to play a large role in this investigation, and our friend Joyce is going to key right in on him because he runs Baptist Hospital, basically. He was involved in the autopsy. He is a first-hand knowledge kind of guy, so he wasn't at Graceland when it happened, but he has expert first-hand knowledge based on his profession and, what happened there at the hospital. So, what he says is very, very important.
Autopsy have been completed, and the cause of death is cardiac arrhythmia due to undetermined causes.
So the cause of death is cardiac arrhythmia due to undetermined causes. And so this is the phrase that's going to throw people into a tizzy, because it's basically saying that he had a heart attack, but they can't tell you exactly why he had a heart attack, which is kind of the reason for all heart attacks. You know, they point to underlying reasons, like they may have some heart disease and stuff. And like we've already heard earlier in one of these videos, they found something while they were in there. But let's hear what else he says.
What this means is that there are several cardiovascular diseases present, which include a history of mild hypertension, which was under pretty good control, and some...
So he has mild hypertension, which they're saying is under pretty good control. That's blood pressure. So he would have been on some kind of blood pressure medications. And if you're on blood pressure medication today, you may be aware that blood pressure medication has undergone significant improvements over time, right? So the blood pressure medication you would have taken in 77 would have had probably a lot more side effects than what it does today. And then Carolyn's asking the question, right, why did he have a heart attack? Because that's not really the cause of death. So I think what the doctor's saying is the cause of death is that his heart started to beat irregularly. That's really an attack. That's what kills you. But what caused that? That's what you're asking, and that's what Joyce is going to ask. And so we are going to get that onto her notebook about that. And we don't know this yet, Carolyn. We don't even know they've done that. So when that comes up, we're definitely going to talk about it. And I think you might be right, Terry, that this was a very tricky public situation, right? Like, he's a doctor. He's not really a publicist. Now, he is an administrator, and administrators do have diplomatic skills if they're good administrators, and they do have a public face, right? So he's thought about this. He's talked to the press guy at the hospital about this for sure. They knew this was going to go out and be national news. And there's going to be stories that come out later that the others that are with him at the table didn't know he was going to say this. So we're going to get into that when it comes up. But right now, if you were Joyce, you would believe that everybody at the table is in lock sync, right? Like, why wouldn't they be? They've come out here to do a press conference. They just came out of the autopsy. They must know what happened. And just to look at some more comments here. Contrary to what Dr. Nick said in public, he knew Elvis had out-of-control habits, and the whole group knew that as well. There's a point of no return that Elvis had crossed many years before this date. That could be true, James. For Joyce, our fictional character in 1977, she doesn't know. She doesn't know that kind of thing. But that kind of thing's going to come out, and she's going to make a determination about it and, weigh that information as it shows up. So let's go back and hear what Dr. Francisco has to say.
Coronary artery disease.
Nope. We're going to go into some commercials here. So let's see. All right. This is good too.
Cars are backed up for miles in both directions down Elvis Presley Boulevard. It has been estimated that at least 2,000 people have stopped here this afternoon, all hoping for some word from the family.
So I want you guys to remember that number 2,000. It's not going to come up in this video, but in the next video, we're going to look at the newspaper articles that come out in the morning that Joyce is going to look at. And their estimates on the number of people outside this gate were not 2,000. And so we're going to just wonder about how they come up with those differences. But we're just previewing for the next video.
That Elvis Presley really is dead. However, there's been no word from the Graceland mansion. Only members of the immediate family are allowed inside. But one uncle did tell me earlier today that Elvis Presley was in his bedroom, got up to go to the bathroom, and that was when he fell on the floor. Fred stole his...
So one uncle, and I'm going to have to just make a stab in the dark that was Vester. Don't know, can't prove it, but someone this reporter describes as an uncle said that Elvis got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and he fell. So we've now put the location of what happened in the bathroom. And I don't think we've heard that yet, so that's kind of important.
Been a gateman here for some 14 years. Mr. Stoll, when was the last time you saw Elvis?
The last time I saw Elvis was last Wednesday morning, about 2 o'clock this morning. We went out for a drive.
And how did he look to you then?
He looked like he's feeling well. He waved at the fans and was smiling.
No evidence of any physical problem?
No, he seemed like he felt well.
Thank you, Mr. Stoll. City officials have passed a resolution making tomorrow a day of mourning for Elvis Presley. All flags in the city are being asked to fly at half-staff. Earlier today, I talked with some of the people who had gathered outside, and here on tape are some of their comments.
From the moment it was announced that Elvis Presley was dead, fans and friends flocked to his house, and some stayed the whole day. Weeping, sobbing friends who were just looking and hoping for some word that the tragedy wasn't true.
David, Elvis. David.
Are you a relative or friend?
I knew Elvis for 20 years. I knew him. We've been here waiting since Sunday night to get a glimpse of Elvis, and last night he left the house about 11 o'clock with some friends and came back in about 2:30, quarter to 3, and he was fine then, and he was smiling and waving, and he had his girlfriend in the car and his doctor and a couple of other people, and they drove up and they waved and everything, and he looked fine. That was about 2:30 or quarter to 3, and then
Now, I wonder who this is that's talking, because she's able to identify his doctor, his girlfriend in the car. She seems to think that she knows these people by sight, so that's kind of interesting. She must have been a fan that was there quite a bit. And then, Carolyn, you're asking, didn't he take an extra packet of medication that night? We don't know, because we don't, at this point, even know that he takes medication at night. We know that there's talk about medication he takes. We know Steve Dunleavy says he takes a lot of medication, and we know that Dr. Nick has said he wasn't taking any amphetamines, but we don't really know anything else at this point. And, you know, it's going to be shocking for Joyce as she learns these items, you know. So think of yourself as an Elvis fan at this time. You wouldn't have known anything because nothing's been published about this. And as each book comes out, and in each interview and each magazine article, and you learn a little bit, and you have to question, is this true? Is this not true? What do I know from before? And nobody was like Joyce, you know, nobody was keeping a notebook, so they weren't able to go back and really compare very easily. And that's how a lot of people got away with a lot of stuff that, you know, nobody was looking at, in my estimate, in my opinion anyway, for entertainment purposes only. But let's go back to this video.
you know, then this morning, then we were here again early this morning, and we saw the ambulance come, and the ambulance flew right in, and immediately we knew something was wrong, and they came right back down, and the ambulance was Elvis Presley's doctor, and they were working on him, and they wouldn't say who it was.
So again, she has identified Dr. Nick in the back of the ambulance.
We figured it was him, but they said it was his grandmother.
How would you describe what you feel right now?
I don't know, I just can't hardly believe it.
I can't believe it. I just can't. I've been a fan of Elvis since I've been 16 years old. And my dream came true. My husband brought me up here yesterday to see Elvis's home, and I've waited 21 years for this, and I don't believe it. I just don't.
No funeral arrangements have been made yet. The Presley family says it's just too early to make those kinds of plans.
Now, this reporter is in the meditation garden, and this cross is there in that meditation garden. Although, you know, I don't think she is in the meditation garden. I think she might be at Forest Lawn, and this is the cross that was on his mother's grave. And then they moved it after. Yeah, I think that might be where they're at now that I'm thinking about that. Anybody knows, let me know.
However, it is believed that Elvis will be buried here in Forest Hill Cemetery,
Or she might tell us right here at Forest Hill Cemetery.
somewhere near his mother's grave. Eileen Jones, Action News 5.
Okay, this next part. Elvis fans, I think you're really gonna find this very interesting. We're not gonna learn any information about, why Elvis passed away or what happened to him, but from just a historical perspective of seeing people that were around Elvis, this is very interesting.
The Upjohn Company, 767-2436.
The news of Elvis's death hit relatives and family members rather hard. One of them, his stepmother, Dee Presley. She talked with Roger Cooper earlier tonight.
Dee Presley was married to Elvis's father for 14 years. 3 years ago, they separated. Today, she lives in an East Memphis apartment where an easel in the living room holds a picture of her stepson.
He was everything. Elvis.
So if you've never seen Dee Presley before, the woman who was married to Vernon Presley, this is her. She's the mother of Billy, Ricky, and David. And she married Vernon in 1960, right after Elvis returned from the army. They met over in Germany, where she was with her husband at the time. And then she got a divorce, and then she and Vernon got married, and Elvis, treated the Stanley brothers as his own brothers. And then they lived for a period of time at Graceland, and then they moved off into their own house. Hold on just a second here. But they moved off into their own house. And then they eventually moved around onto Dolan Drive, which is, it actually connects to the Graceland property. And there was a gate that you could get through. But here, she and Vernon have separated, and she is off by herself in a different spot. And I don't know exactly where that was, but that's where this interview is taking place.
Was the greatest stepson, friend. He was just everything to me.
Oh, who do I think is at Forest Lawn? That cross is the cross that was at Gladys's gravesite at Forest Lawn. And when that video was taken, she identified it as Forest Lawn. So after Elvis passes away, they put him in the mausoleum at Forest Lawn. Then they move his body back to Graceland. And when they do that, they also move Gladys, and they move that cross. So that cross is now in the meditation garden. And that's why I was confused earlier when I said, oh, I think she's in the meditation garden, because that's where it is now. So if you go to Graceland this summer, definitely while you're at the meditation garden, take a look for that cross. That's the one that Elvis bought and put on his mother's grave.
And to my sons. And we loved him so much. I just can't believe it's happened.
What kinds of things would you like to do together when you were together?
Oh, I suppose our favorite time was Christmas. And playing in the snow, riding horseback, and just gathering around the piano and singing hymns at Graceland. Those were the special moments, I think, and with Lisa and Priscilla. We were a real close family.
Dee Presley says the separation didn't seem to affect her relationship with Elvis, and she stayed in close touch with the Presley family.
Was Elvis playful? Did he ever trick you or play a joke on you? You recall?
Yes, he did. He was very playful. He used to, the 4th of July, would have the fireworks, and Elvis used to just put off a firecracker or something right in one of the dens to frighten everyone. And of course, I seemed to be the one a lot of times that he'd do it too. He liked to play tricks.
But you two got along pretty well.
Wonderful. Really great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. I'm so sad. I loved him so much. I hope you'll forgive.
During his life.
So you heard it from Dee. They got along wonderful. Okay, this one is interesting too. We definitely want to see parts of it.
By our studios this evening, bringing his father's scrapbook and talking about what he remembers about Elvis Presley.
Main thing I remember about him was before they started playing professionally anywhere, that they used to play out in the front yard, Elvis, and Scotty, and Medidi. And
so this is Bill Black's son, and we go back to that picture.
Before they started playing professionally anywhere, that they used to play out in the front yard.
This is Bill Black, and he, of course, played bass for Elvis Presley and on the famous That's All Right, and then toured around with him for several years. This is Scotty Moore, and this is DJ Fontana, and that was all the Blue Moon Boys, Elvis's backup band. So here, you know, Bill passed away of brain cancer in, I want to say 1968. I'm not absolutely positive, but sometime around then. And left his two boys and his wife. He had been fairly successful on his own away from Elvis. He had released a few records. They were instrumentals, but they sold fairly well, which was kind of a big surprise for instrumentals. So he was kind of like blazing a new path. So it was very unfortunate and tragic what happened. But this is what his son remembers. So his son would have been a young boy remembering Scotty and Bill and Elvis practicing before they went out on tour in the early days. This would have been like late 1954 and throughout 1955.
Elvis, Scotty, and Medidi. And I used to just sit down under a big tree out there and just pick and grin, if you want to call it. And they went on and played around in a few places. I think they played up at Thor's Engine House and places around town there. They used to just try to play a little music.
So what did you think when Elvis became the king of rock and roll?
Well, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, you know, that my father was in something like that with him, you know, and to go places. And it was really something, because everybody, all the kids would ask me, you know, I mean, what does Elvis look like? How does he look really in person? Is he a good man or what? And I said, well, yeah, he's fine. He's a real good fellow to be around.
Is he a good man? Was he a good man?
Yes, he was. The main thing I remember about that was when my father passed away in 65, he come out to the house. And when he got ready to leave, before he left, he went over to my mother and he said, Evelyn, he said, I want to tell you that if there's ever anything that you or the kids ever need, he says, don't you ever hesitate. He says, you come and let me know.
What went through your mind when you first heard?
Well, I really couldn't believe it. I wanted to see what happened. Turned on the radio. The first thing I heard was the king of rock and roll, which passed away.
Elvis Presley's music knew no color barrier. It appealed to black and white alike. Tonight.
So that's what Bill Black's son had to say about Elvis, which I found really interesting, and that Elvis had helped their family after Bill had passed away. Let me just scan through the rest of this. I think that was it for this particular video. Yeah, that is it. And we are at 54 minutes, so this is actually where we're going to end this broadcast. I really appreciate Terry and Carolyn, you hanging out with me throughout this. And hopefully we'll have a couple more viewers maybe for the next one and get a really great conversation going. You guys threw out some excellent comments and questions. And then what I do after this is I kind of go back through these videos and I complete Joyce's notes and I go through all the comments that come in, both live here and then I'll come in on the video later. And, you know, the ones that have questions that Joyce is thinking about, those I'm going to put into her notebook, and Joyce's voice is really going to be, you know, our voice, the voice of the viewers. as we work through this mystery of what happened on August 16th. And I think you guys can already see we haven't even got to the end of the day yet. And we've already got conflicting reports about almost everything. Or we have information that's not, it's not joining together in a easy to understand way for us, and people are using confusing language, and different people are saying different things, but they're all trusted individuals. So and we got to see somebody that could identify Dr. Nick from sight. So that, and I have no idea who that was. It was very interesting. So hopefully, we'll all get together again real soon, and we'll do part 3, which will finish out the television stuff for that first night, and we'll get into the newspapers, and there's a lot of newspaper articles and a lot of details, and I think you guys are really going to find it interesting to see how each one of these details made it into this story. Will we ever know the truth? We will know as much of the truth as we possibly can. Now, like some people are fond of saying, we weren't really there, so we can't ever really know the truth. But we're going to get as absolutely close as we can without having been there, to what we believe is the truth. Something that we can all say, hey, I think this is what happened, and something we can stand behind because we've got the historical proof to back it up. Terry, I really appreciate that comment. And that is where I'm going to end it, guys. And I will see you on the next one. Talk to you guys soon. Hillbilly Cat History out.